well as agriculture.
When you say well-disposed countries, would you take aid from the Eastern Bloc as well as from the West?
The devil you know is better than the devil you don't know.
On September 30th, 1966, the British protectorate known as Bechuanaland gained independence and became Botswana. Sir Seretse Khama became the first president of the nation, which is faced with a difficult predicament as they were surrounded by hostile neighbors such as the notorious apartheid South Africa and Rhodesia. And the nation was also severely impoverished with only 12 kilometers of paved road in a nation the same size as France, and the population immensely lacked educated individuals. Despite all odds, the man known as Sir Seretse Khama was able to overcome these insurmountable challenges and managed to change the trajectory of the country. Let's get into his background. Sir Seretse Khama was born on 1st July 1921 in Sorowe, in what was then known as the British Protectorate of Bechuanaland. Khama was born into an aristocratic family, as his father was Segoma II Khama. He was a chief, also referred to as C of the Bangangwato people, and the son of Khama III, one of the most famous and influential chiefs in Botswana's history. Segoma II became chief in 1923 but ruled only briefly before his death in 1925. Khama's mother, Timane Khama, often referred to as Shimangatso Khama, she was one of Segoma's second wives and a member of the Bangangwato royal family. After Segoma's death, young Seretse was only about 4 years old, so he was raised by his uncle Tshisekedi Khama, who became the regent and guardian of the Bangangwato tribe until Seretse was old enough to rule. Sir Seretse Khama's education was impressive compared to his other African counterparts, who were limited in their education due to the racist restrictions that were imposed on the natives of Southern Africa at that time. In primary and secondary school, Khama was enrolled at Tiger Kloof Institution in South Africa, a respected missionary school run by the London Missionary Society. The school was renowned for educating future African leaders from Southern Africa, and it was there that Khama developed a robust sense of Christian discipline, leadership, and ethics. After completing his secondary education, he advanced to university, where he attended the famous Fort Hare University, where he studied a bachelor's in general studies. Fort Hare was a prestigious institution attended by other notable figures such as Nelson Mandela and Oliver Tambo. It is also important to mention that Khama struggled with his health during his upbringing, with him suffering from illnesses on a frequent basis. After finishing Fort Hare, Khama traveled to Britain to pursue a legal degree. He enrolled at Balliol College, Oxford University. Later, he continued his legal training at the Inner Temple in London, one of the 4 Inns of Court, to qualify as a barrister. During this time, Khama was known as a serious, intelligent, and resolved student. He impressed many of his British peers with his confidence and intellect, yet he also faced subtle racial prejudice in post-war Britain. In 1947, while in London, Seretse met Ruth Williams, a young white English clerk who worked at Lloyd's of London. They shared an interest in jazz music and quickly fell in love. Despite intense opposition from Ruth's family, the British government, and even Khama's uncle, Tshisekedi Khama, the two married in 1948. The marriage was viewed as a taboo by the apartheid government and was generally met with hostility from the Southern African region, particularly from South Africa, Rhodesia, and even his own tribesmen. Traditionalists led by his uncle and regent, Tshisekedi Khama, strongly opposed the marriage. They saw it as a violation of Swana customs, since marriages of chiefs were usually politically strategic, meaning to unite clans or maintain royal lineage. Tshisekedi also feared that marrying a white woman would bring political trouble from both South Africa and Britain. However, after meeting Ruth and seeing the couple's commitment, many ordinary tribesmen, particularly younger and more progressive members, came to support Seretse. In a public Kopla tribal meeting In 1948, Seretse defended his marriage before thousands of people. The majority voted to accept Ruth as a queen, showing remarkable courage and open-mindedness for the time. The South African government under apartheid was furious about the marriage. They viewed it as a direct challenge to racial segregation and racial purity laws. Pretoria feared it would encourage interracial relationships in South Africa and undermine apartheid ideology. South Africa's Prime Minister Daniel Malan put heavy diplomatic pressure on Britain, which still controlled Bechuanaland, to act against Seretse. They even threatened to cut off access to crucial resources and cooperation with Britain if Seretse were allowed to rule. In response, the British government sided with South Africa and declared Seretse unfit to rule, exiling him in 1951 not because of any wrongdoing, but to preserve relations with the apartheid regime. Now let me give you some context regarding Botswana, then known as Bechuanaland. In the 1980s, during the scramble for Africa, European powers were racing to colonize African territories. The Botswana chiefs, led by Khama III, Seretse's grandfather, Sechele, and Batwen, were alarmed by Boer expansion from the Transvaal, modern-day South Africa. In 1985, they asked Britain for protection to avoid being taken over by the Boers or by Cecil Rhodes' British South Africa Company. Britain agreed, creating the Bechuanaland Protectorate, which is not a full colony, meaning local chiefs retain some authority. The British administered Bechuanaland indirectly through tribal leaders, but they invested very little in its development. The capital was moved to Mafikeng, which ironically was outside the Protectorate's borders in South Africa. Bechuanaland remained one of Britain's poorest and least developed territories, with no major infrastructure, minimal education and healthcare, and heavy dependence on migrant labor to South African mines. When Seretse Khama was born in 1921, Bechuanaland was still under British control, but governed largely through traditional chiefs under British supervision. Britain saw Bechuanaland as a buffer zone between its colonies and South Africa, not as a place worth investing in. Because of its close ties to South Africa, apartheid leaders had significant influence on British policy towards Bechuanaland, especially regarding Seretse's marriage. Now back to Khama. In 1949, the British government sent a commission of inquiry to Bechuanaland to assess the situation. The commission found no reason Seretse was unfit to lead, but Britain suppressed the report because it went against their political aims. In 1950, the British government barred Seretse from becoming chief, claiming it was in the best interests of the tribe. A year later, in 1951, Britain went further, exiling both Seretse and Ruth from Bechuanaland entirely. They were sent to live in Britain, where they struggled financially and emotionally. Seretse was forced to work ordinary jobs while campaigning for justice. News of the exile caused public outrage in Britain. Church leaders, members of parliament, journalists, and ordinary citizens condemned the decision. Newspapers like the Manchester Guardian and the Observer ran editorials supporting Seretse and Ruth. Anti-colonial groups and human rights advocates saw the exile as a clear act of racial discrimination influenced by apartheid. After 5 years of public pressure and a change in political mood, the British government finally relented. In 1956, Seretse and Ruth were allowed to return to Bechuanaland, but with strict conditions. Seretse was not to be reinstated as chief of the Bamangwato. He would only return as a private citizen. However, his return marked the beginning of a new chapter. Instead of focusing on tribal leadership, Seretse turned to national politics. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, Seretse became increasingly active in Bechuanaland's political scene. He founded the Botswana Democratic Party, also known as the BDP, in 1962, uniting rural and urban groups. When Bechuanaland gained independence as Botswana in 1966, Seretse Khama was elected the country's first president, the same man the British had once declared unfit to rule. When Botswana gained independence from Britain, it was one of the poorest countries in the world. There were only about 12 kilometers of paved roads, 22 university graduates, and no major industries. The economy depended almost entirely on cattle farming and British aid. Many expected the new nation to collapse like other post-colonial states, but Sir Seretse Khama had a clear and disciplined plan to avoid that fate. Khama set the foundation for stable democracy by establishing a multi-party system and regular free elections, encouraging rule of law, an independent judiciary, and a non-partisan civil service. Leading by example, he lived modestly and was known for honesty and humility. The game-changing moment came just 1 year after independence. In 1967, geologists from De Beers discovered diamonds at Orapa in central Botswana. Instead of allowing foreign companies to take full control, as happened in many African states, Khama renegotiated the deal. The government formed a joint venture with De Beers called Botswana, with 50% owned by the Botswana government. This ensured that half of the diamond profits went directly into national development. This was one of the smartest economic decisions in African post-colonial history. Khama's government used diamond revenue prudently, as they built schools, hospitals, and roads across the country. Khama's government also established free primary education and affordable healthcare. They invested in water systems and public infrastructure, transforming rural areas. They also set up a sovereign wealth fund known as a Pula fund to save money for future generations. Khama also prioritized long-term stability over short-term gain, and corruption remained exceptionally low. During the ongoing liberation struggle of Southern Africa at that time, Khama kept Botswana non-aligned. He maintained peaceful relations with neighboring states, including apartheid South Africa, while still supporting anti-colonial movements covertly. He also allowed refugees and exiles from South Africa, Namibia, and Zimbabwe to seek asylum in Botswana, but prevented Botswana from becoming a battleground. He built a professional, non-political military and police force, ensuring the country remained stable internally. In 1980, Khama sadly passed away from a terminal illness. However, despite his untimely demise, he managed to make significant achievements in his country, which included making Botswana one of the fastest growing economies in the world, good governance, a high literacy rate, good healthcare, and a stable political environment. Sir Seretse Khama's legacy is one of a visionary leader who managed to transform his country into a peaceful and prosperous nation, despite arduous challenges. Thank you for watching. This was African Icons. I hope you enjoyed the video, and please like and subscribe for more content like this.